Well, I'm pleased to be here this morning with fourth grade teacher Susie Carter and paraprofessional Jessica Laycock at Mark Twain Elementary School in the Lake Washington School District. Both Susie and Jessica have really modeled what really good, strong collaboration looks like in our public schools for inclusive education. So I wanted to invite them here with us today to have a conversation about some of their takeaways this year, what they've learned, and what strategies, supports, and belief systems they've developed that really make this collaboration work for all students. So I'm going to start by asking, at the beginning of the year, thinking about that foundational time when you were preparing, getting ready for the year, how did you define your roles and responsibilities for instruction for students? And then maybe talk a little bit about how these may have evolved over time as you both got to know one another and learned about the strengths and needs in your class.
Yeah, I think for me, at least, I was really lucky that Jess had been working with her student for, this would be her 5th year with her. And so I felt very comfortable deferring all things her at the beginning of the year until I got to know that student better. Just saying what has worked in the past, what might work right here, and what could we try to make her successful in 4th grade. And I think my role then was sort of, here's the 4th grade curriculum, and then just continuing to have those conversations about how we can make it all fit.
For me, every year is a brand new start, even though I've been with my student for 5 years, because we enter a new classroom with a new teacher who has a new style and personality, and the dynamics are completely different. And so while I know my student well, I, take that time to get to know the teacher and how she works. And, we just sort of shift and move until we find a good balance. And that really has shifted over time to where we are both very equal in our roles.
So it seems like there's kind of getting to know you period at the beginning where you're kind of figuring it all out. And just for you, that means also you've had to get to know the curriculum at every single grade level as you've moved through. I can also think of potentially one advantage being just even though, you're kind of assigned to support one student, there's many of these students that you've seen grow over the years. So a lot of the student body that's in this 4th grade classroom.
That honestly is probably my favorite part. I haven't just been able to watch her grow. I have watched this entire grade level grow from kindergarten on, and I've watched her relationships grow with them, and my relationships have grown with them, and they trust and come to me. And as we enter a new classroom with a new mix of all the kids, I can help navigate those relationships. And for new people that, come in that we haven't been with before, we're able to really find that friendship and connection piece because I know this group so well.
I love that. So, Susie, how did you and Jess kind of align your philosophies around inclusive education?
Yeah, it wasn't as hard as you might imagine, because we both really just feel that every kid can learn. And it was, for us, a lot of it boiled down to setting the expectations really high for the students, and then sort of letting the student lead how we need to adjust, like getting to know her and what she needs and what she's excited and interested in, and saying like, oh, maybe doing it this way isn't working, and adjusting like that. So we both had that philosophy that everyone can come in and everyone can learn, especially if, as the professionals and educators that we are, we pay close attention to how and what they're learning, and what they're interested in and how to adapt it. So that part was somewhat easy for us, in that we both felt like anything was possible as long as we were paying attention.
I love that, Susie, because that can definitely be where people get caught up. And it seems like in your classroom, there was this culture of presuming competence from the very start. So when you have that culture, it develops a space where everyone belongs and everyone feels like they're a learner in that space. So I really appreciate that. What about you, Jess? How did you feel like you aligned with your inclusive education philosophy with Susie?
Well, what you just said about presuming competence was there right from the start. And it's not always. Everyone has a different idea about what inclusive education looks like and what expectations should look like. And, lots of people think you start low and then build up. And in my experience, that is just not the best way to go. The student that I work with, she blows me away all the time with what she's able to do. And so I have learned from her that you start at the absolute highest and then adjust accordingly. And both Susie and I felt that. One of the challenges that we face is that, the kids move to other people and other paras and other teachers, and, just trying to have that be the standard all the way across, so that the expectations aren't different everywhere we go. And we both also feel that way too, that it's important for everybody to have big expectations. And something that we have been talking about a lot is that success looks different for everyone. And that is one of Susie's and my, big thoughts, is that success looks different for everyone, and that is okay. It's actually better that way.
Right, for all students, right? All students
Yes.
make progress and show what they know in different ways. One of the things I love about your partnership too, and we'll get kind of into this in a minute, and Jess, you alluded to this a little bit, was that also through your partnership, you've created all these amazing resources and you've created these philosophies. You don't hold them close. You share them with the school community, which I think is really exciting. So when people come to you as resources, you're not saying, oh no, these are ours. These are something that just we use. I know that it's almost like your classroom has become a hub for kind of collecting some of those resources and using them across the grade level, which again speaks to that kind of true collaboration, trying to grow that culture of presuming competence, which I think is really exciting. So speaking of curriculum, which we've talked about a little bit, when and how often do you have the opportunity to meet about curriculum? And how do you collaborate to provide that more universally designed classroom? Like you were just talking about, like Susie, Jessica, talking about how you really think about the success for each student looks different. And then we'll kind of follow up by talking about, because we all know this happens, what does collaboration look like on the fly versus kind of that more formal curriculum and instructional planning?
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's really hard to find the time to collaborate and meet and make sure that everything gets communicated how it needs to. So we do have one like full fourth grade team meeting that Jess attends every week, which I think is valuable for her because then she can sort of hear like what is the big picture that we're trying to get everyone to, and we can start sort of working at like, well, what's the goal and how can we move our student toward that goal, and what are sort of the different ways we can get her there. But I would say most often we have about 5 minutes before when Jess arrives to when she has to be somewhere else for her assignment, and then about 10 minutes after school. And those are probably the most often used times. And it's just like, hey, how did this go? Or, hey, this is coming up. Here's the copy that I have made that we're going to be using in a couple hours. Can you help me figure out sort of what we can do or how to fix it to make it more accessible for our student?
Great.
I mean, also there are times in the day where we touch base multiple times a day, really. There are those conversations that we have in the morning and after school, but several times throughout the day, we'll check in with each other, or I'll take something up and say, okay, this wasn't working. This is what I did instead. You okay with that? And, we do it on the fly a lot when we can possibly have things in advance and look over things and talk about things. We do whenever that's possible.
And how these shifts and change, like thinking about instruction different, like there was a student that just supports in the classroom, but how's that shifted and changed the way you guys kind of engage in curriculum planning and instruction, like across all students? Has it made you become more flexible or think about different ways that students can engage in that
The
curriculum?
word flexibility came up a lot as we were reviewing these questions. It's like clear communication and flexibility. We have found those in our sort of conversations about all of these questions. It was as a teacher, I don't know a lot of teachers that came into the profession that don't like to sort of be in charge and be in control. And you sort of need to let some of that go and recognize that kids are going to present their learning in all sorts of different ways and share their ideas with you in different ways, and opening yourself up to it not just being this singular thing. And so that was another one of the things that Jess and I talked about, was especially when we don't have a ton of time to communicate, is me making it really clear. So what do we want to get from this? Having those learning targets posted, which I do most days, but it's also sometimes it's that on the fly thing where I have to swing by the desk and be like, okay, this is what I really want from it.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think, we talked about kind of the lack of time and how it's hard to kind of find those times, but, when you have those conversations, you said you're having all the time, but, I know in education, sometimes we struggle with building this culture of like giving and taking feedback. So how do the two of you give and take feedback with one another? And do you have an opportunity to build time for reflection? And then how do you reflect together?
I think it just goes back to that we're both open and pretty humble about the idea that we're not perfect, and that this is education. No matter who is in your class is going to be messy, and you're going to make mistakes and you have to learn from them. And I need to be receptive to the feedback. And it's been actually really lovely having Jess in the classroom, because she has come to me multiple times about students that aren't assigned to her and said, hey, Susie, I noticed this kid is struggling with this. Because so often, when there's 26 students in a classroom, it's really hard for me to always know for everything we're doing how each student is feeling about it. But so just being open to those ideas. No one likes to hear that they're not perfect, but it's knowing that every year education in a classroom is a new creature and it's dynamic, and having all of those different things respond and react is great. And I feel like Jess has been very easy for me to give feedback to, because she has that same idea. It's that we're not going to get it perfect the first time.
Seems like you've really built a relationship based on communication and trust.
There's a lot of mutual respect here, which is amazing, and I think necessary for any successful partnership. And we really are partners in here. We have that piece, and I think having the same philosophies on things, and really, really wanting all of these kids to be successful, no matter what that looks like, and no matter how we get there or how much effort it requires.
I was just thinking how beautiful for these students, for these children, to be able to see the two of you collaborate with one another, to be able to see how you use each other as resources. That's just such good modeling for learning, for for their opportunities for collaboration and working together. Just makes me think what an incredible experience for the students too, to learn from this.
Susie is great about building this environment of helping and supporting each other and working as a team whenever possible. And And the kids love that. They get so much more out of working as a team or partners. And, it gets to the point where like she'll go over an assignment and they're like, can we work in a team? Can we work in partners? And once in a while, the answer is no. And they're like, because normally that's how they work, because that is how, she has seen that it is successful in here for them.
That's great. Well, speaking of, is a nice segue to my next question, which is, what is one thing you've learned this year about collaboration? And kind of building on that, have you learned anything about yourself as an educator? And if you were to provide the major elements that make this partnership work, what would you name? I know we've talked some about that already, but really, what have you learned about collaboration, and what have you learned about yourself as an educator through the experience this year? Also being, a post or still in the middle of a pandemic year, coming back to school, what have you learned?
I mean, our big thing, as we talked about this, underline, is flexibility again. That was just a recurring theme when we talked about that. And that, something we talked about as we were going over these questions is that we don't ever lower the rigor. We just have to be willing to readjust and find different approaches. And that takes more work and more effort on our part. And being willing to do that, I think about this when I'm going to sleep. I'll think, okay, this is coming up. How can I make this work? And we both just have really high expectations of each other and of the kids. And flexibility. And
yeah, I'll second that. It's that flexibility. It's going back to that being open and humble to those different ideas, that our first try isn't always going to be the right try. Sometimes, a lot of times from my perspective too, it's the curriculum gives you a certain way to do it, but that's not always going to work for every student. So finding those different ways to present or process the information for the students. As Jess said, I do love a lot of teamwork in my classroom. I love when the kids are working together. We've had a lot of conversations lately, especially around, we're state testing right now. And so a lot of them are thinking like these scores are the be all end all. And I told them, when Miss Jess and I interviewed for our jobs, nobody gave us a math worksheet. Let's talk about these teamwork and being flexible, and like how we work together is going to be really much more important. So that flexibility, understanding that there's lots of ways to do it. Thinking back over the year, I think one of my biggest takeaways is just giving myself that grace to fail, because it's not gonna work all the time. September and October, there were a lot of, looking back now, knowing the student better and knowing how I can reach her, and how I can work and communicate with Jess in a more efficient manner. I was like, oh, we should have done this, or we could have done that. But just knowing that you're not going to hit the ground running and be successful all the time, and understanding that it's all a process has really helped me process all of the UDL and inclusion that we're working on in the classrooms. And I think that that's a good message to send out. Like, it's not perfect. It's never going to be.
But I love what you said, Susie, there about what you have learned about yourself as an educator over time, because that takes as someone who's been teaching for a while, making sure that you're adjusting and shifting and changing based on what your students are communicating to you that they need as learners. And to me, that's really powerful. So how am I shifting and changing my instruction, my curriculum based on the information they're giving me about what they need? That responsiveness is so critical, is crucial, for inclusive classrooms. So I really appreciate that. And we all do that. If I would have known, back then what I know now. Jess, what about you? Have you learned anything about yourself as an educator this year?
I guess as I was thinking about this question, so that, every year, because I've been with this student since kindergarten, and it is not getting easier. It's not. It's getting harder. The curriculum gets harder, the rigor gets harder. And I can't tell you how many times I have heard the word can't.
Mm.
They can't, he can't, she can't. And sometimes that does make me feel like, I can't. And that really does. I mean, especially this year, the curriculum is a lot harder. And I think what I've realized is that it is not going to get easier. It doesn't matter how long I've been with the same student. It doesn't matter how familiar I am with the curriculum in the classroom. I always have to be challenging myself to do better. I can get pretty comfortable because I've been in the same school for a long time. I've been with my same student for a long time. And you can get a little cozy maybe and a little, not complacent, but something nicer than that. And I can always do better, and I need to do better because it is not getting easier, and it is my job to make sure that she's successful, and that means me working harder.
Yeah, so kind of taking that ownership as the educator and not expecting students to change, but knowing that as the educators are learning and shifting and changing to be able to provide the best educational outcomes for our students. I really appreciate that, Jess. So thinking about your partnership, so as a general education teacher, having a paraprofessional in your classroom, in an inclusive classroom, what would you want folks who are watching this to take away from our conversation today?
I mean, that's a big question. I guess my biggest takeaway, Jess and I talked a lot about it yesterday, was just remembering to put the kids first and sort of setting our own educator professional egos to the side, and knowing that the students will help you understand how you can adjust and how you can change. And it's not about us being comfortable up in the front of the classroom, but it's about the students feeling comfortable and learning and processing the information in the ways that they can.
Yeah. Jess, anything you want to add to that?
This feels related in my head. I don't think I've ever been in a classroom where the flexibility piece is where it is. And I'm just going to tell a quick story because I have learned a lot actually being in this classroom. We have a schedule on the board every single day. Typically we follow it to the best of our ability. And, the other day, the kids were just off. It was a rough day. And instead of doing what we were supposed to do, Susie had everybody push the desks back and sit down on the floor in a circle, which in fourth grade, we have never done. I mean, that happens a lot in kindergarten and first. And she just said, like, what's up? We spent a lot of time on that. And it was so much more important to listen to those kids and how they were feeling and what they needed than it was to follow the schedule. And that is something that I really take away this year, is that when you see a need, you drop everything and you fill it. And that actually makes everything go better. It's a reset. It allows for that success. And that sometimes that is what success looks like, is dropping everything and providing a need. And I have loved that about being in here, and our collaboration and our relationship has been really successful because we have both been really willing to just drop and do.
Oh, I love that. We're going to end on that because that was so lovely. Jessica and Susie, again, fourth grade team at Mark Twain Elementary, one of our IPP demo sites in Washington State. So appreciate you speaking with us this morning and sharing what works in your collaboration to create an inclusive classroom for all students. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.